first of all, environment, which is, there's still naysayers out there today. Then we are talking about behavior change and we're saying, hey, you need this. So we aren't really selling a product or a concept that people willingly want. Like, I'm not out there kind of, solving a pain point that people see daily. So it's a lot harder, right? Like, it's a problem that you have, but you probably don't know about. Like, and it's something that needs to be done and someone needs to do it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our weekly show What If. You just heard Amishi Parasrampuria. She founded the Upcyclers Lab in 2018, which is a social enterprise that is changing the way children learn, think, and feel about the environment and sustainability. As most human behavior is formed by age 9, Upcyclers Lab designs and makes available play-based learning tools such as board games and puzzles for children between 2 to 9 years. Think flashcards that help you learn alphabets with elements that make up our environment, board games that need your help getting 4 endangered animals back to their habitats, and pencils you can plant after you've got into its tiniest bit, of course. These learning tools create a fun learning environment for the children and brings about a mindset and behavior change around important concepts of waste segregation as well as ocean and animal conservation. All right, we're zooming out a little bit. India's relationship with the environment dates back to historical times when nature and its endowments were worshipped and considered a place of serenity. Rapid urbanization and industrialization has choked up our cities, villages, water bodies, and forests in, you guessed it right, plastic and some seriously harmful pollutants. There is an urgent need for environment education to go beyond just prescribed activities in the school textbooks, which are generally pursued for the purpose of clearing exams. At this critical point in time, it becomes all the more essential to instill active learning practices that expose young children to their surrounding environment and stimulate their thinking on how best they can manage and conserve it. Upcyclers Lab is doing just that by empowering children to be powerful agents of change, and in many cases, also helping influence the adults in their life.
So how I started Upcyclers Lab is actually an interesting story. I have been in the space of sustainability for the last 7 odd years. And for the first 4 years or so of that, I was actually making products out of waste. I was actually upcycling them. And the target audience at the time was adults. And so we made these beautiful home decor products out of waste plastic and we sold them to adults. And the vision was always to kind of enable conversations and, get people to change their mindset and behavior around waste and around the environment. And 4 years into like doing this with adults and working with that kind of product line, we realized that adults really don't care. So adults kind of, they think that, okay, once we purchase the product, our responsibility is over. And that's all that we need to be responsible for towards the environment. And so it was kind of going against what we wanted to achieve. So, while there were a lot of sales and a lot of media recognition, we just didn't feel like that was something that we wanted to do long term. Because it really wasn't aligning with the vision that we had for the problems that we wanted to solve. And around the same time, I was actually doing a not-for-profit project with kids. It was as a part of Global Shapers, which is a volunteer movement spearheaded by the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. And we were doing this project and we worked with about 1,500 students there. And they really kind of got involved in the cause around plastic waste, and they got the adults in their life involved. And that was really inspiring to see. And so that's when I kind of had an aha moment and I decided, yes, we need to work with kids. That's how Upcyclers Lab was born. And then I had my co-founder come on board, Manav, and we kind of started the journey in 2018. And decided to work in early education, where we created play-based learning tools on the environment and on environmental concepts to encourage behavior change. And then when we did more research, we realized that most behavior actually does get developed by the age of 9. So it worked out quite well from our vision alignment perspective as well.
That's a beautiful story, and I love the fact that you had to first experiment with adults to find out that it may not work with them, and the real change makers could be the kids who could eventually influence the adults. So that's
Yeah.
great. You spoke a little bit about what Upcyclers Lab does in terms of play-based learning. Could you elaborate on how you are creating the tools and the different kind of techniques which are helping kids learn more about environment and sustainability?
Sure. So at Upcyclers Lab, what we wanted to do again early in our journey as well, we experimented a lot with different formats. We did workshops, we did activity boxes, we created all sorts of different learning tools. And then what we kind of went with was puzzle storybooks and board games primarily. The reason being, one, we wanted long lasting tools. So as opposed to activity boxes, which typically last just for one use because you finish the activity and then it's done, you already used up all the materials. We wanted something that can be used repeatedly from a sustainability perspective as well. And that's why we went with board games, storybooks, and puzzles, because all of these things you can use again and again. And when we do create products, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. We usually have at least 2 product designers working on the product development part, and then we come in from the environmental education part. And then at every stage we do testing, concept testing, and then prototype testing with different stakeholders. So stakeholders like teachers, parents, even kids. And we test out every version before even the final designed version is out. So we do a lot of testing throughout the process, a lot of like asking questions. And when we start the design process, we actually start with the end goal in mind. So we start with answering the question, what is it that we want the child to learn from this learning tool? And then we move backwards and look at different play mechanics and see kind of what works for that particular age group. And then accordingly test out these different formats before we land on a final learning tool. So the entire process takes at least 6 to 8 months, and it's a very long drawn out process which takes a lot of effort and thinking in terms of how the tool will not only teach the child something, but it's also really, really fun. And that is something where that is a place where I think we shine, because there's been a lot of people who've tried to make tools before, which are either too educational or too fun and like not educational enough, right? So I think we kind of hit that balance really well, where we're teaching kids what we want them to learn around the environment. So it could be about like waste segregation and types of waste and where the waste goes after they've segregated it and things like that. But then it's also fun, and there's also like a competitive angle inside the game itself, which makes it really fun for like repeat play. So those are the kind of things we do even for really young kids. We in fact have a Kickstarter campaign coming out later this year in November. And what we have for those that really early age group is we know that they learn very well through stories. And so we have a storybook and a puzzle combination, where through the story we talk about a character called Forgetful Bob, who's really irresponsible in his home, and he does not conserve water, he does not conserve electricity. So we talk about all of the things that he does incorrectly through a nice picture storybook. And then we have a puzzle where you actually have to go into his house and correct all of his wrong actions. So when we say puzzle, it's not just like a simple put together a picture of an endangered animal and that's sustainability puzzle, but we actually have some sort of thinking in the puzzle itself. It's something that requires you to really decipher what is a right and wrong action, and it's related to climate change and the impact that you're making. So that's kind of what we do and how we develop products in a nutshell.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I don't remember having something like that in my life 20 years ago. I wish I did, but the kids today, well, they have access to this, and very much necessary, considering our planet is not doing the best and we need such interventions, especially at the early stage. So that's brilliant. You spoke a little bit about the effort and time that it takes usually to get a product out and to develop and test the product. So when you think about the entire process and keeping the organization in mind, who are the heroes of Upcyclers Lab, and what has their contribution been to your mission?
I mean, so many, right? Like, I don't think that any company, any organization, any movement for that matter is made by just one person. And while we might champion the founder, or the CEO or the head of a particular movement, I just don't think that the movement would have been possible without all of the heroes in the background. So for us at Upcyclers Lab, of course, my co-founder Manav and a really, really important person in our team called Pooja, who has been like literally our rock, I think, through everything, and to the extent that she really believes that this to be her company. So I really want to kind of take this opportunity to recognize the work that she does for this cause and for the organization. And of course, we have like a lot of partners which we've been very, very blessed to have, that kind of promote the work of Upcyclers Lab across the globe, not just in India. So they could be in the form of sales partners, in the form of designers who worked on the projects, just tons of volunteers who just wanted to dedicate their time because they loved the concept, they loved the organization. So I mean, obviously I don't have the time to name all of them,
Of
but
course.
they've just been such strong sort of supporters of this entire cause and the journey. And this has been, all of these people have been in the picture since day one. So it hasn't been, that once we are successful, we're seeing all of these people suddenly come in. But there's been lots of people who've been sort of so fundamentally glued into the concept that they've been a part of the journey since day one.
And you did say that you are not only you are operating out of India, but your vision and your mission also says that you would like to scale globally. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that's been going so far?
Sure. So we've actually already started working globally. We currently work with organizations in Kuwait and Singapore. Both of these organizations work closely with the government, and in many cases, they also receive funds from the government to execute their projects. So in both of these countries, we're currently working to get our products into the Green Schools programs. So we've done a pilot already in Kuwait, and the pilot in Singapore is ongoing. And very soon we should have rolled out to the entire country of Kuwait, hopefully by later this year or next year. So we've already kind of started working with the government and these organizations in both of these countries. We also plan to expand to Egypt perhaps next year. And in this is of course all of our B2B models, but we also want to kind of launch B2C because we feel very often it may not be, climate change may not be like a government's priority, but the people really care and they want to kind of support the cause and they want to do their own bit. So in this case, we've tried to, this year in November, we're actually trying to launch a Kickstarter campaign where we're hoping that people from around the world who resonate with these concepts will, individually purchase our products to really talk about these things with their children and with their students, and with the other kids in their lives. So we have, like I mentioned, that amazing product called Green Guardians with the storybook and puzzle, which is going to be launching in November, and it's going to be shipping worldwide through as a part of our Kickstarter campaign. So that is one way that we really want to target the B2C audience and get them involved in the conversation as well.
Hi there, it's me again. Okay, confession time. During my conversation with Amishi, I fell prey to a very common notion, and that is what has been working or has worked in the past globally to bring about a behavior change towards adopting more sustainable practices can also work in our local communities. What I miss to see here is that while our environment is a global common, the solutions to restore and regenerate can only stem from local interventions. Amishi explains this really well.
So when we look at the government from the government's perspective, when you're trying to work in a country like Kuwait or Singapore, which are smaller countries with less diversity in terms of languages, in terms of just sheer culture. Whereas in India, I mean, if you move from one state to the other, it's like moving to another country altogether. The diversity is too vast. So the context has to change with each state or each region that you're trying to, target. So that is, of course, an issue for a government of our size. But also, I think with a country like ours, there's so much focus, and there has to be, rightfully so, there should be so much focus on infrastructure development. So I think we're not at that stage where we are thinking about behavior change, because the infrastructure still doesn't exist. So only when the government has adequately invested and put an effort in growing the infrastructure can they really focus on behavior change. So that is definitely a challenge for us as a country. And I think from a parent's perspective in India, we're so used to like traditional methods of education. So there's a lot more focus on education that isn't necessarily experiential. And yes, the trend is shifting. There are a lot of pioneering schools that are moving to experiential education. There's lots of programs now in the country which weren't there 10-15 years ago. And all of this is changing, but it is changing. The landscape is changing in a very small way. Like there's still a majority of the studies is still through conventional forms, and it's only in certain boards that you see and in certain urban pockets that you see where there is experiential education. Even in experiential education, I think the focus of Indian parents has been and will be for some more time, I think, STEM learning, where their focus is more on math and science based learning. And so if you go in with, say, a robotics program or a coding program, there is a much higher appetite for those kind of programs versus an environment program. So these are some of the challenges that we faced in India. For sure. And it's not just us, but there's been a bunch of other peers that we've spoken to that have faced similar challenges with their concepts, if they are not STEM related or, math and science related in some way. So that's definitely been a challenge. I do think it's changing. I think there is a large segment of parents that are now growing and moving more towards sort of environmental education, but it's still very small compared to the international market, for example, or if you look at like what the math and science market is in India. So that is something that we hope will change over the next few years. And yeah, we just wait and see whether it's a good time for us to relaunch in the country. So I think we just feel like really grateful and blessed to be on this journey in any case, because there's just so much happening all the time. So it's been a really exciting journey, but I think certain moments that definitely stand out for us. One was, when we got accepted into the Power program, which was supported by Shell Foundation, DST government of UK, DFID government of India, and Zone Startups, and that program was all about women in clean energy and the field of environment. That was something that was really exciting to be recognized for the work that we were doing. And similarly, when we got our first sort of order with the B2G, B2B space that we were exploring, which was in Kuwait, that was something that was very exciting for us as well, because, there was this validation sort of for the work that we were doing. And there was this absolute stranger who from completely different part of the world who trusted us enough and who liked our work enough that they wanted to, make that purchase. And it wasn't just like an individual. It was literally an organization that was working with the government, and they needed to get government approval on the product. And so when we actually got the government approval, it was really exciting. So I think there's lots of such moments, when every time we get a big order, or every time, people just call us in and like believe in us. Like we've had so many parents taking videos of their children and sending it to us saying, hey, our kids love this product. And that's just so exciting to see. And I don't think it ever gets old, like seeing those videos and seeing those pictures. So I think we have those moments, and we know to celebrate those moments, because we know that we have to be grateful for these moments more often than not. So yeah, we feel really blessed and grateful for sure.
So, when you think of those moments of wins and celebrations, what are some of the learnings that have come out of it and have made your team stronger today? Something that you will take ahead with you as you move along this journey?
For us, in terms of learning, it's always to be kind of grateful and have gratitude. It's definitely a difficult path that we've chosen. It's not an easy business to be in. First of all, environment, which is, there's still naysayers out there today. Then we are talking about behavior change, and we're saying, hey, you need this. So we aren't really selling a product or a concept that people willingly want. Like I'm not out there kind of, solving a pain point that people see daily. So it's a lot harder, right? Like it's a problem that you have, but you probably don't know about, like, and it's something that needs to be done and someone needs to do it. But it's a very difficult thing to sell. And even in the environment space, there's so many people who are in the environment space and still don't work on behavior change or don't think that's an important enough subject, when in reality, like, we believe very strongly that it's only behavior change and policy change. These are the only two pillars that can really help in this fight against climate change. So, I mean, for us, not easy. So, any wins that we can get, we're always grateful for. And I think that is always a big learning, to have gratitude and to be grateful for the people who help support this and really drive the vision forward.
Amazing. You've already answered my question of what are you grateful for. So, looking ahead with your wins and the learnings and the partnerships that you've created and built, the collaborations that you have today, what do you envision for Upcyclers Lab and what are you hopeful for?
So I think we're hopeful for a world where we are not required anymore. I mean, I think any social entrepreneur that I speak to, they all kind of, start with that they know that they're trying to build a world where their services or their products aren't needed. So that's kind of what we hope for as well, where we are in a world where people are already, so focused on climate change and their actions towards the environment that they don't really need to be told how to behave. But I know that that's a while away. So in the near future, we hope for just more supporters, more people, supporting the cause in whatever way. I mean, they may not necessarily be buyers of our products, but even if they get inspired from us, inspired by the information and the content that we put out through our social media channels and make, a difference in their lives, I think that's a big win for us as well.
I love that. And I think that's the core of having a social change ecosystem. And that's what we're here to do. That it's not always about your goal or your mission or your product, but it's about the impact and the change that you want to bring about. So that is going to be my learning for today. Thank you for that. All right. So we come to the what if question. I ask this question to all the speakers, and this is something for the listeners to ponder over and hopefully take away from the show. Is that
okay?
What if we changed our relationship with waste? And what I mean by that is not see waste as a nuisance, but something of value and something, we take care of by reducing its consumption or in its usage or segregating it. So what if this mindset shift came into effect? And how do you think that will enable behavior change or just change at a larger scale?
Right. So that's exactly what we're trying to do, where we try to kind of nudge people into first changing their mindset and then eventually changing their behavior. Because the mindset definitely comes first. And I think that is that perception shift of changing waste, changing the languaging around waste as well. For it to be called a resource, I think is really important. And I think that, all of the work that a lot of my peers have been doing as well over the last 7-8 years has definitely led to impact in this space, because I see a lot more people kind of composting. I see a lot more people, rallying their building societies to go in for zero waste solutions. Of course, this is also thanks to the plastic bans and the EPR and the waste segregation policies that the government has brought in. But, all of these kind of collective efforts of everybody has already seen this shift happening. But yes, in the longer term, we're hoping that more and more people are moving towards a space where they have very, very little waste leaving their homes. And that is easier than others, because in Indian households, almost 70% of the waste that gets generated at a household level is wet waste, which is already very easy to work with, right? If you just segregate, you can have 70% of your waste essentially either change into compost or change into energy, because now you have wet waste to energy plants, which are really easy to install as well.
Correct.
So so the balance 30%, a lot of it is made up of plastics, which you use in household products, which are all highly recyclable. So honestly, if you think about it, like you rightly said, it's just about kind of changing your definition and see if there's value in waste. And I think a lot of this can also be changed when you start to assign monetary value to waste, right? So today, if someone, for example, paid you and took your wet waste to compost it, then that could be something that you would definitely want to then segregate when you have, even if it's a small amount, if you have some monetary value attached to it. And we've seen this traditionally in Indian households as well, where a lot of women, homemakers earlier used to always save the newspapers that came home to give the Raddiwala at the end of the month. And it's not like you're getting some significant amount. It's just that you assigned a value to that waste and therefore you kept it aside. So that's kind of what we need, a more sort of streamlined process, maybe an exchange, a waste exchange of sorts where you can actually list your waste and someone comes, picks it up and derives value out of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's moving in that direction, but yeah, there's definitely more that people can do at an individual level as well.
If they had to learn more about the environmental landscape currently, whether it be in India or globally, how do you recommend they start? What is something that you have been reading currently or something that you've come across recently that'll probably open up some eyes and ears?
So I recently read this book. I'm so glad you asked me this because I just finished this book. It was such a great book by Mary Robinson. It's called Climate Justice and a Man-Made Problem with a Feminist Solution. So that's the name of the book, and it's a very boring title. So don't get disheartened by the title. But the book was brilliant. It was just a collection of stories of women at the grassroots level who were facing the effects of climate change. So it could be a Hurricane Katrina survivor. There was one lady who was from Africa, like a nomadic tribe in Africa. There was one from a nomadic tribe in Eastern Europe. So there were all of these women who were at the forefront of climate change, some of them in urban settings, some in rural and across the world. And what actually brought them together was the fact that they were women and that they were all facing, changes because of climate change. And they were facing all of these adverse effects in the way that they lived, in their culture, in their lifestyle. And it was something so inspiring to see because when I read about these stories through this book, I just saw how this affects all of us. So we may say that, okay, this is something that's sporadic, or these events, this is something that happened in another part of the world. So it's very easy for us to kind of just shut our eyes to that. But to see how interconnected because we're all, on the same planet and we're the same species, it's just so interesting to see that today we may not be facing it, but this is something that is going to impact us in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So even if it doesn't impact us, it is going to impact our children. It is going to impact our grandkids. So it's something that we need to do today. So I really like this book. If anyone wants something to read that's, story based and it's just seeing actual instances of what's happening on the ground, I definitely recommend that they read this book. It's a really light read. Please do not get swayed by the title. And it's a really fun read as well. So I really like this book.
If we are going to pass on the stewardship of our planet to the children of today, they need to be equipped with the right knowledge and practical resources. One can go on pointing fingers to understand what, how, and who led us here. But the reality is our environment is changing, and it's changing fast. It is in our control to take action. Action starts now, and it starts with us. All right, friends, that's a wrap on today's episode. We trust that you are left feeling more hopeful and positive about the actions that you can take starting today. And we do hope that you will check out what Upcyclers Lab has to offer. You can find them on their website or one of their social channels. Or check out Amishi's Medium blog. It is very interesting. You can find all the links in your episode notes. Also, your thoughts are always welcome here. So go on and share them with us on our website, Facebook, or Twitter. Do subscribe to our show and share it with your close ones. It helps us continue amplifying stories of impact and grow our community of change partners. Until next week, stay safe and don't forget your gratitude for today.